Life has a habit of coming full circle, and this is the perfect example. I remember when I was a kid that my family wasted no time in investing in a big Volvo when they had mum, dad and 2 kids to carry around. And here I am some 40 years later doing just the same, carting my young family around in a big Volvo. However, this XC90 is a very different beast to the 240 estate that was the family car of choice in 1970 Sussex. Back then, no one talked about SUVs or hybrids, and only farmers bought 4-wheel drive vehicles. Yet here I am in today's flagship Volvo SUV, complete with hybrid technology and 4-wheel drive, and we've just spent 6 months finding out how good a family car it is. How did we do that? Well, with the toughest test we can imagine. Everyday family life in southwest London for mum, dad and a 3-year-old daughter. Together we've covered the best part of 5,000 miles, and in that time the XC90 has been not just our family ferry, but it's also had to cope with my working life. And that means everything from my regular commute to attending car launches all around the country, and even the occasional 400-mile round trip to Auto Trader's head office in Manchester. It's even been a film star, taking centre stage in our series of advice videos on child car seats. However, we were testing much more than the XC90's abilities as a family car. I very deliberately chose to run the T8 twin-engine version because I wanted to see how effective its plug-in hybrid technology was in everyday life. And now that we've reached the end of our time with the car, we're taking the chance to look back and let you know what we think. If there's one thing that any good family car has to provide, it's space. And in the XC90, you get that by the bucket load. Not only is there acres of room in the front seats, there's just as much room in the row behind, and that makes it really easy to get our daughter in and out of her child seat. What's more, on the very few occasions when I have used this car as a 7-seater, I've still been impressed. There really is enough room inside that car for 7 adults in reasonable comfort. Most of the time though, we've just treated it as a 5-seater. But even with all the gubbins and stuff that a 3-year-old brings with them, my wife and I have never even come close to actually filling that massive boot. There's no denying that the XC90 is quite a costly car, but as you look around the cabin, you really feel that you're getting your money's worth. The fit, the finish and the materials aren't just a match for any SUV at this price. They're as good as anything you'll find in a proper luxury car. Much of the credit for that sense of class is down to this senseless infotainment system. It looks like a tablet computer set into the dashboard. And not only do I love the fact that it massively reduces the number of buttons and controls on the dashboard, I've also found it really easy to use. Okay, so it did take a little time to find some of the functions hidden away in the depths of its menus, but it really was only a little time. And since then, I've had no problems. As I said, this test has been about the hybrid system as much about the XC90's abilities as a family car. And around town at least, it's been excellent because I can get around mostly using electric power alone. In what Volvo calls the pure driving mode, the car responds really quickly, and just as importantly, the transmission is really smooth too, juggling away between the 2 power sources. And of course, I'm always happy in the knowledge that I'm driving around with 0 emissions from the tailpipe. It's also great for my overall fuel economy because the 20 or so mile range on the batteries is plenty for my most regular journeys. On an 18-mile journey into central London, for example, even with the stereo on and the aircon all the way, the trip computer told me I was doing 120 miles to the gallon. Longer journeys hold no fear either, because the XC90 is a great place to while away the miles. The front seats are some of the most comfortable I've ever sat in. The ride is smooth, and you'll be threatening your driving licence long before the wind noise threatens to disrupt the calm inside the cabin. Oh, and while I think of it, I've really come to appreciate the pilot assist feature that's standard on every XC90. This combines the features of adaptive cruise control with a system that allows the car to follow the white lines on the road. This means that on a dual carriageway or a motorway, although you have to keep your hands on the wheel, the car will automatically take care of the accelerator, the brakes and the steering. And in turn, that takes away all the stress and the hassle involved in just keeping up with the ebb and flow of traffic. Now I know it's a bit unfair to criticise a car that's big on the inside for being big on the outside, but I'm going to. The trouble is, I spend a lot of my time in and around town in heavy stop-start traffic like this, and the sheer size of the XC90 can be a problem. It means I can't just dive into gaps in the traffic, have to take longer to get down congested streets, and I even have trouble parking. And I confess there have been occasions when I've chosen to take my aged Seat Leon rather than this to my local shopping centre. Now I never expected to get as much as the 134 miles per gallon that this thing returns in the official fuel economy tests, but I'd certainly hope to do much better than barely get within 100 miles per gallon of that. Overall, in the 6 months I've been driving this car, I've averaged around 40 miles to the gallon, and I grant you, that's not too bad for a 2-ton, 4-wheel drive, 7-seat SUV. But it's not much more than owners say they get from their diesel-engined XC90s. Again, within my overall figure, there's been quite a bit of variation, and I have managed to get an impressive 50 miles per gallon from a tank of fuel on a couple of occasions. Trouble is, that's offset by the much more disappointing 30 miles per gallon that I get on longer motorway runs that are all too often a part of my motoring life. The trouble with the hybrid is not just that it fails to deliver anything close to its official test economy in real life, it's also that it costs much more to buy than the diesel, and you'll never recoup that extra through lower fuel bills unless you spend almost your entire motoring life around town. The hybrid system is even harder to justify because it's noticeably less effective in the winter. Now I know such thoughts may be a million miles away on a beautifully sunny spring day like today, but when the temperatures drop, not only can you go less far on a single charge of the battery, the petrol engine is much quicker to kick in, and that obviously reduces the all-important fuel economy. In a car that's packed full of superb attention to detail, I find it amazing that this little thing should slip through. I mean, it's hard enough just to find the button to release the glove box, but when you do, the reward is the lid smacking down onto your passenger's knees. We've come to my local retailer, Volvo Cars West London, to hear direct from the company a little bit about the kind of people who buy Volvos like this. And the first thing I've learned is that my car isn't completely typical of the XC90s that leave the showroom. For a start, well over 2/3 of buyers go for the D5 diesel engine rather than the T8 hybrid that I have, and which only about 30% of buyers choose. Over the country as a whole, our design trim, as on this car, is the most popular, although inscription that I've chosen is not far behind as the second most popular. Likewise, it turns out I've chosen the second most popular colour too, because Onyx Black is a little bit more popular than the Osmium Grey on my car. Likewise, most people go for the charcoal leather interior, whereas I chose the lighter blonde. Anyway, enough rambling about the XC90 in general. What about my car in particular? If I was choosing it again, which boxes would I tick on the options list? Any XC90, and especially one in inscription trim, is well equipped. But even so, this particular car came with thousands of pounds worth of options, and I think that some of those are absolutely essential. First to fall into that category is the Xenium Pack, which is an absolute godsend on a car as big as this. That's because it includes both an automatic parking feature and a 360-degree surround view camera, and that's something I use on an almost daily basis. Now, it may look like an expensive pack, but when you consider that it adds only £30 a month to the cost of a typical finance package, I think that's money very well spent. Another no-brainer is metallic paint, particularly when you realise that choosing it not only makes your car much smarter, it also pays for itself, and that's because it improves the residual values so much that it actually adds nothing to your monthly costs if you're buying the car on finance. I'd also recommend choosing the air suspension, as it certainly makes the car ride a bit more smoothly. It also gives you a handy feature that lets you lower the car, which makes it much easier to load and unload the boot. Again, it looks like a costly pack, but it'll only add about £40 a month to your typical finance package. However, even though I am a massive music lover and I reckon that this is one of the best stereos I have ever heard in a car, I struggle to justify the Bowers & Wilkins stereo. It'll add several grand to the price of the car, or about £60 a month to your finance package, and I simply can't argue a case for that. It's much the same story with the massaging seat, which I just don't really get along with. Mind you, if it was my wife making the choices, then that would be the first box she'd tick on the options list. What this test has proved beyond any doubt is that the XC90 is a superb family car. It's spacious, comfortable and refined, as well as having a wonderfully classy cabin. I can't fault its practicality either, and it's coped with any challenge that myself, my wife and my daughter have thrown at it. However, I am in two minds about that hybrid technology. On the one hand, I know the hybrid system works really well in certain circumstances, and I have seen fuel economy well into three figures on several journeys. But the trouble is that my life doesn't allow me to get the very best from this hybrid system. I do spend a fair amount of time in the urban jungle, but I also do just too many long journeys for the hybrid system to really work for me. So after 6 months with this car, would I recommend an XC90? Without a moment's hesitation, absolutely yes, and to anyone. But would I recommend a T8 hybrid? Well, yes again, but only for some people.